Hello there. I'm Anthony Brandt. This is another in a series of conversations that we have here at LTV with prominent artists and writers and poets on the East End. And I'm here today with the lovely Audrey Flack, who is one of the great artists of our time. And she has been an artist for all her life, from the time when she was very young. She always wanted to be an artist. And she's collected everywhere. She has pieces in museums all over the world. And I'm proud to know her. I really am. I think she's one of the greats. So I wanted to ask you first thing, Audrey. I want to quote you, if you don't mind.
Oh my. Hi, Tony.
Art is a calling. Artists are not discovered in school. And my first thought was, well, you went to school, but you already knew you were an artist. You were going to be an artist. And yet you went to school and you took courses at the, what's the name of that high school in New York?
Music and art.
Music and art, okay. And then you went to Cooper Union, and then you went to Yale as graduate school. So you took a lot of school. And you came out of school in the 50s, and you immediately, as far as I can tell from the record I have, started to paint in the abstract expressionist style. And I've seen pictures of some of those paintings. There are not a lot of those paintings, but I've seen pictures of them. And they struck me as being unique in their own way. They were very characteristic of a person of great passion and of great intensity. And their colors just, they fill the canvas. There's no white space. And you did that, I don't know how long you did that. How long did you do that?
How long did I do that? Well, you know, realism was beaten out of you in those days.
Yes.
You had to be abstract.
Right.
And in my gut, which I think is in everybody's gut, is the desire to reproduce yourself on paper, is to draw your parents or your friends, you know, little stick figures. I think that's natural. It's not natural to do an abstract painting.
Right.
No child starts that way.
Right.
But by the time I went to music and art, everything was abstraction. So it was Picasso, it was the Cubists, it was Braque, it was Juan Gris. And I believed them because you sort of had to believe them,
right.
You know. But secretly, I always sketched. That was the secret. And then by the time I got to Cooper Union, that was the heart of abstract expressionism. And that was one of the most exciting times in all of art history. Well, of course, the Renaissance. I think about ABEX right now, and I'm wondering if it will collapse. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it will stay because it was important. But the things that it did not deal with, I mean, we had just come out of World War II.
Right.
So I was at Cooper Union, I got out of high school in '48. So I went right into Cooper Union. 51. It was a 3-year school then. The war ended in '45.
Right.
None of them dealt with it. Nobody was dealing with this horrible war. You know, they were self-expressing. And when you really look back at it, there are a lot of questions to be asked about that movement. And I mean, this is heretical to talk like this now. But I'm just thinking about it because I mean, I loved it. Anyhow. But as far as artists not being discovered in school, see, in a way I was in kindergarten.
In kindergarten?
Because I was such a hyperactive wreck.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't sit still, and physically, I'm like, and I'll probably cross my legs 20 times during this thing. So I was always in trouble, and I was, the bad girl, little Audrey. So I was always getting thrown out of class. And one time, the teacher, you have to leave, because I would giggle and I would laugh, and I was the one who threw the spitballs, and I couldn't sit still.
Right.
I'd have been on Ritalin, Yeah. So they sent me in the hallway, and one teacher had pity on me because I was alone in the hallway, and gave me a piece of oak tag, which is kind of this sort of slick cardboard thing, and a couple of pencils or crayons, and that was it. Then I became the class artist, and I drew the pumpkins for Halloween and the Christmas trees thing.
So it's just born in you.
I think, when you hear artists say, I need more time to paint, that creativity it's necessary. I don't know, in another society, which we call primitive, maybe we make our own clothes. You sew beads on, like the American Indians, who I love, and I love what they do. You make things with feathers, you make necklaces, you carve your utensils, you paint your body, you paint your things. So creativity is there, and some people just have to. You have to. And right now, with it being commodified, a lot of kids go to school and they take classes on how to make it and how to do this and how to sell your work and how to get it out there, and it really is something deeper than that.
Well, that's my thought too. I taught writing in college for 1 year, freshman composition. And I came away from that thinking there are people who simply know how to write, and you don't really need to teach them.
Really?
Yes, and there are other people who don't have a clue as to how to put a sentence down on a piece of paper.
But can't you hone their skills?
You can do some things. You can teach them some of the tricks of writing, but the freshman composition is all about writing essays about other people's work. So if you don't have a gift for that, you're screwed in college, because that's essential. That's what you do. That's how you learn. And I found that it was very frustrating. And they fired me right away.
Ah, Tony.
But I was glad to be fired, really, because I didn't enjoy it at all. And I have no ability to follow rules.
Well, yeah.
I'm very bad at that.
Me too.
And you can imagine me in the Army. I was in the Army for a while, and I couldn't follow the rules. I was an officer, so I didn't really have to, but nevertheless.
I had a different, I was a really good teacher. I was a great teacher, I've got to tell you. And I loved it. I was so broke, and I had 2 kids, and I had to pay the rent, and I had a husband who was a little off the wall, and so I got a friend of mine, Sid Tillum, who was an art critic and an artist himself, asked me to substitute for him a drawing class. I love to teach drawing. And I think you really can refine somebody's eye. And there were very few books. I didn't know. I looked up books, and then they say, can you teach drawing? Sure. Can you teach three-dimensional design? Of course. And a lot of these things I didn't know. You need to just look
Right.
it up 2 minutes before because you need the money. But my drawing class, I turned out to be such a good teacher that I got more classes. And so I would teach, I got a class at NYU, so I would like feed the kids and then take the subway from 104th down to NYU. And then I got another class at Pratt, way out in Brooklyn, so I'd have
Right.
to go there. And then I'd have to go back to NYU. A woman, so they gave you the worst hours. You know, you got the sort of scraps. And then you had to be thankful that you got that. But I have to tell you the gratification, because I loved it. You know, I loved teaching anatomy and drawing. And I got a skeleton. I saved the skeleton from being destroyed by the students. I still have my skeleton.
Where do you keep it?
It's in my New York studio,
Oh, okay.
hanging there. Beautiful skeleton, a real body. You know, they started killing people for skeletons, so
Yeah, 19th century.
it's very hard to get a human
18th
skeleton,
century.
and I've got my human skeleton.
Do you have a name for it?
Well, Miss Frankenstein, because I think it's put together. I mean, I think her head is a female head, and the thorax might be male. I think the pelvis is female. You know, I think it was, but I love her.
They went to the boneyard and picked up the scraps.
Well, they might have put two, they might have
yeah.
done something. And it's all named, every vertebrae, so.
So we were talking about abstract expressionism and your early career, and you left it behind, and that's what I wanted to ask you about.
Well, it wasn't as if I stopped. That need to draw realistically was inside. It never went away. And consciously, unconsciously, I'm not sure, figurative images started to appear, like de Kooning. You know, de Kooning at one point gets the whole women's series.
Yeah.
So I did paintings where figures started to appear like that. They were still abex, and they were still abstract. There was one that figurative art, representational art was really put down. You were a lower species of artists. You just didn't do it. You couldn't find a gallery that, only the junky gallery, Portraits Incorporated, you could find a representational painting. At the Met 19th century wing, where you have the Bouguereaus and wonderful 19th century paintings, not one. In the basement, condemned, made fun of, ridiculous.
That's hard to imagine.
Oh, that's how it was.
Yeah.
So I did a painting, which, you know, I didn't take pictures. Like, I don't have any pictures of Elaine de Kooning in me, or Grace Hardigan in me. And I have with Bill de Kooning, but that was later out here. But I didn't think about it. So I don't have a picture of this painting. I didn't take photographs then. But Ruth Kligman, who was in the car with Jackson, who I introduced to Jackson. Sorry, Jackson. I'm sorry, Lee. Had no idea. But Ruth sold. Ruth was had a job as a director or a little secretary, whatever, in this one-room gallery on 56th Street. All the galleries were on 57th, so it could have been Alaska because nobody went to 56th Street.
Right, right.
And it was, you went up a series of steps, one of those parlor floor things with a scratched window. And in those days, if you wanted to show your work, if you weren't Picasso or you weren't a blue chip artist, you either went to a co-op gallery or you read the papers and the word went out, oh, you could get into some group show somewhere. Mm-hmm. City Center had a call for artists for a group show. And it was the vestibule where during intermission people went out and smoked. That was the gallery. And I sent my slides in those days you had slides. And my work was accepted, so I was thrilled. I think I had 2 or 3 paintings in there. And Emily Genauer, do you remember her? She was a critic for the Herald Tribune.
Wow, that's a
Herald Tribune was a major newspaper with very good art critics. The next day after the opening was so funny because there was so much smoke from people smoking cigarettes you could barely
see it.
And I went, and fortunately, you have no control where your work is hung. It was hung well, mm-hmm. and it looked good. Emily Genauer picked out my work and wrote about it in the Sunday Herald
Holy
Tribune.
cow, wow.
Little Ruth Krigman, not so little, sexy as she was, saw that review, and the owner of the gallery, David Greer, gave her the opportunity, because she was bugging him, to curate a show. And she was smart. She didn't know a damn thing at that time. She just came in from New Jersey and wanted to be in the art world, didn't know anything. She saw that review. Next day, my phone rings. And I was now living, I had given up my studio on 8th Street because it had no kitchen, bathroom was
primitive.
Well, it was a toilet bowl in the middle of the loft.
Oh,
so I had no kitchen and no shower, no bathroom, and the heat was. But that's how we lived,
right?
You know. But I had a whole floor in a condemned building. Right. But now I was living on a 5th floor walk up in Chelsea, 328 West 21st Street. And Chelsea wasn't what it is now.
No.
So in walks this, she could have been a double for Rita Hayworth. She was gorgeous.
Really?
Gorgeous. That kind of hair. But a floozy. You know, she had like these sunglasses, for me on the 5th floor, and and a polka dot dress. I mean, she was Miss Polyester. Mm-hmm. But she had a way of talking. She looked at my work, said, "I saw your work, and I want to put you in a show." So there were 3 artists. One was in Morton Lux and me, and I don't remember the third. And she began talking about my work. She mesmerized me. I couldn't have talked about it that way. She had, a thing. And eventually, and she said, who are the important artists? Oh, remind me, I'm gonna go back because I talk like this, I go like this.
It's fun.
The painting that she put in the show, she saw was a figurative.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what the subject was?
Yes, it was like a woman with a pink, like Rembrandt, lady with a pink. So it was this sort of semi-abstract, but you could tell that there was a face and there was breasts and some rose. Sold to Marcel Marceau.
Seriously?
Yeah. I don't have a picture. I don't know where it is, but I got to go to Europe for the whole summer.
Oh, that's cool.
I think it sold for $500. I got $250. That was enough for the. But
Okay.
anyhow, Ruth said, who are the important artists? I said, abstract expressionists. What's that?
She didn't know?
She didn't know anything.
Wow.
She didn't know anything, and she didn't know how to dress. You know, Jackson bought her clothes.
Uh-huh.
But she was shrewd and sexy and ruthless.
Yeah,
Ruth was
that's
ruthless.
helpful.
And I didn't really like her. She sold my painting. You know. So anyhow, I clued her in on what art was going on at the time.
Yeah.
And she said, "Who's important?" And I told her, and she said, "In what order?"
My
I said,
goodness.
Jackson Pollock, Bill de Kooning, Franz Klein.
Right.
Guess what, Tony?
She,
She made a beeline. She had an affair with Jackson, was in the car with
Right.
him when he died, and her poor friend, Edith. She then goes to Bill, has an affair with Bill, and then she goes to Franz Klein, lived with him for a
same
while.
thing.
She was amazing. I mean, amazing.
Oh my. That is amazing. Well, you knew all those people. You knew de Kooning and Jackson Pollock. and-
Not the way Ruth. I mean,
No, I understand, but did you hang out with them at the Cedar Tavern and those places?
I would go there. First of all, I can't drink that much. I mean, I used to drink whiskey sour. They would drink scotch with beer chaser.
Yeah.
Oh, they put the lemon in them or a lime. Why do you do that?
I have no idea. I don't drink scotch.
Well, that would go in the beer, in the top of the beer. So, you know, it was this and then that. But I mean, if I have 2 drinks, I'm feeling really good. and if they're strong, I'm on the floor.
Yeah.
You know, my body just,
No, you're a small person physically, so I don't think you could take a lot of
I couldn't take it.
liquor.
So, and I just couldn't do what they were doing. I just couldn't. You know, it's sort of embarrassing to say it because you're not supposed to, but I came from a bourgeois family.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And you just, you know, I don't know. I think that's part of it. So did Phil Pearlstein and my friend Harold. You know, we were the ones, you had children, you took care of your children. You didn't abandon your children. You didn't become an alcoholic and fall on the floor and beat people up. So there was a value system that seemed to be different, and they scared me. You know, Jimmy Ernst, when I bought my house out here, belonged to Jimmy. And he wanted an artist to have it. And I needed a studio. And Bob and I came out 1970. I came out long before that, by the way. I rented on Neck Pass, a little shack. But I saw Jimmy, and nice man. And he wanted me to have the house, you know, and I saw the studio. I fell in love with the house, and we bought it like then. But Jimmy, his hands were shaking. And I thought, why is he so nervous? But he had the DTs.
Oh.
He was an alcoholic too. But he said he was afraid of Pollock. They were scary. These people were scary. They were scary.
And it had to be hard to be a woman artist in that kind of environment.
Yes.
First of all, you don't get the traction that males automatically get in the press or anywhere.
No, you don't.
And you have to fight for every bit of attention you get.
And
And it's hard in those circumstances to follow what is basically your star, your way of being, your way of painting, sculpting, whatever you're doing. You got to fight for it. And I can see that in you. You're tough.
I'm not tough. I'm such mush. I mean, I cry at parades.
I cry at ads.
At
I'm
ads.
as emotional as they come. But
I'm not tough.
but there's an inner strength.
There's an inner. It's like you do what you do because that's who you are. I mean,
Right.
one, I couldn't drink like that.
Right.
I had a lot of boyfriends, but I mean, I couldn't kiss somebody that I found repellent, you know, or somebody that was going to beat me up.
Right.
Although I've had, you know, my share of difficult relationships with a couple of nutcases, but this was, you know, if you really examine a lot of those abstract expressionist people, they were very disturbed people with suicides, mental. Clement Greenberg was in a mental institution.
Was he really?
Yes, and he was an alcoholic, and he slapped Frankenthaler around. You know, you don't hear that. Pollock, who I worshipped, if he was sitting here with and you said something you didn't like, maybe he wouldn't even have to. He would take this table, and it would be like that. He was scary.
Yeah, that's
Scary.
Good. That is scary.
How do you relate? You know, those women. I feel very sorry for Lee. And I think about those women who are now supposed to be feminists and strong, and they were strong. But you know that song, "Stand by Your Man"?
Oh, yes.
Whatever. Who does that?
I don't know.
They stood by these guys that Joan Mitchell got beat up constantly, knocked off bar stools. What Lee took from Jackson and Elaine, sleeping with everybody to get him a gallery. So I question, you know, they acted strong, but they were acting like men.
Yeah.
They weren't acting like women. And of course, Grace, I get very upset about Grace, who became a good friend of mine later, in her later years. We got very close. But Grace sacrificed her only child for that life. It wasn't to be an artist. You could be an artist, take care of your child. But she lived I don't know how many guys she married, how many affairs she had, how many crazy things she did. I don't consider that a great thing to do.
Well, it's an impossible choice, and you faced it to some degree. You had 2 daughters, and you had Melissa, who is autistic and is still autistic and always will be autistic, and you had to be the mother to those 2 daughters at the same time that you were in the middle of establishing your career. That had to be extremely difficult.
To say the least.
To say the least. But you did it.
Well, it was not easy. You know, really was very difficult.
Yes.
I'm not saying, you know, that I was better than they were, but I think when you decide, when you have a child, it comes with a certain amount of responsibility.
A great deal of responsibility.
And you take care of that child. You could ruin their life for the rest of their life. You don't just, if you can't afford it, if you are so poor that the child will be better off somewhere else. If, well, I think, during the war when the Jewish families had to put their children on trains to send them away to save their life, but to get in a little more painting time and a little more drinking time at the Cedar Bar, and a little more affairs, a few more affairs. Grace, towards the end, when she stopped drinking, and I can talk about it because she became a real advocate for AA. And I remember talking to her, we were at I was giving a lecture somewhere in Michigan, and it might have been a commencement thing. And Grace was doing something else. We were both invited to stay at a collector's house.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up early in the morning because I wanted to see the de Kooning on the living room wall. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, it was sunny, and I go in the kitchen because I was thirsty, and Grace is sitting there, and there's a big glass of water, and I'm thirsty. Hey, hi, Grace. Hi, Audrey. I go like this.
It's vodka?
Straight vodka.
Oh, my God.
And I say, Grace, you're killing yourself. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You're acting like all those guys. What are you doing? She said she had to have it to work. She needed that drama. Well, then, my lecture didn't do much good. Or maybe it had something because she stopped. She went to AA.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we got pretty close. Grace got involved with my daughter, Melissa.
Really?
Yeah, and I thought maybe it was out of guilt over her son, Jeff. Interesting.
Very interesting. Let me change the subject a little bit. There's a painting out here that everybody can see at the parish. It's a Vanitas, and it's one of several Vanitas paintings. But I spent a lot of time looking at it the other day, and it takes a lot of looking because there's so much going on in that painting. And I've noticed that about your painting generally, that you tend to fill on the ambitious paintings, you fill the canvas. There's no wasted space. There's always something going on.
Horror vacui,
Is
it's
that
been
it?
said.
And also in the painting that you've just finished, the one that we had
That your poem is in.
That's true.
You have inspired me, Tony.
That we unveiled the other day in front of a crowd. And that too is a very busy painting. And it's full of art historical references. It's got the Dürer that is kind of the basis for it. You're not filling in the colors so that it looks like a bit like the original Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse print that he did, that is so powerful. This also is powerful. And it's very interesting that you do that. In the Vanitas one at the parish, there's a little bit of black background, but basically it's all objects. There's a skull, there's two skulls. There's mirrors, there's a candle, there's jewelry, there's a clock.
Grapes.
Grapes.
There's Melissa.
There's Melissa, yes, and there's yourself.
An hourglass.
Yes. And it's in that photorealist style, which you prefer to call super realist. And I also don't think you're a true photorealist in the sense that all the males are with their cars that spread all over everywhere. And I'm thinking that what you're painting is not only things, but you're painting meanings. You're painting the true meaning of vanitas, which is vanity, vanity, all is vanity. We all die. All that we are and all that we own is all vain, because we don't take it with us. Nothing. And I see that in a lot of your other paintings as well. I remember seeing in here the one you did of the Holocaust, where they've just been
World War II.
World War II, yeah. And the concentration camp has just been opened,
Liberated.
and the background is all these sad, tortured faces. And then in the front, it's petit fours, it's little pastries, it's all these things in this contrast, and that's a painting of meaning more than it's almost of anything else. The meaning is so in your face. You're not going to let anybody forget the contrast between the way most of us lived through that war and these people lived through that war. And this strikes me as one of the great things about your work is it's got an incredible moral center to it. But you have to study it out because it's not always transparent. You have to look at it. And there's another painting in there I really loved, which is the Royal Flush.
Ah, for my mother.
Your mother, exactly, who loved to gamble. And the cards are all laid out, and it's a bit where a bunch of men have been playing poker, and there are cigars, some of them are lit.
Glass
and
of
there's
scotch.
Glass of scotch, there's a beer. It's crowded with stuff. I mean, this is what is so wonderful about your work and what makes it so distinctive and so unmistakably Audrey Flack. You wouldn't argue with that, would you?
Oh no, there's great descriptions. You have to think that this is coming at a time of minimalism.
Yes. I hate minimalism, by the way.
Well, you know, in a way, I feel that that's elitist. You know, minimalism or looking at a canvas that's solid black or solid white, or I remember going with a friend of mine who's a professor of art, and I won't say whose work it is, but there was like a cube of not a solid cube, and we were saying to each other, well, what is it? You know, it is what it is. It is a sticks, you know, whatever, made into a cube. That is what it is. So I think my work got into trouble because I really wanted my work to have meaning for everyone, even. And I get it out here, like if the light, I have trouble and the electrician comes into the studio, they genuflect, you know, I mean, have them take off their hat. And that gives me such pleasure.
Yeah.
But in terms of an art world where you want it not to interfere with your new modernist coffee table and your sleek sofas and your carpeting, and you got this crazy painting filled with all kinds of things. So I got criticisms on some of those paintings that were devastating because of the very thing that you like. And if an artist tells you they don't care, it's not true. It's like a dagger in the heart, you know.
Of course.
When you get that review, particularly the Times called World War II, which I think is, you know, one of 3 Vanitas paintings that took me a year and a half to paint, and my heart and soul. And they said it was grotesque and vulgar and the colors, and then I was criticized. how could I put pastries next to these stars? I mean, all I cared about was money. It was really devastating. 10 years later, it was called a masterpiece. But it's tough. And it's where you fit in the art world, or I guess in the poetry world, or in any world. But I think there are always people out there who understand, who are on your level.
Mm-hmm.
Who is art for? 300 collectors that these mega galleries control in China and Abu Dhabi or wherever they are, billionaires? Is that who it's for? Or is it for human beings? Is it for people? And I think my art, is for people. And I don't think you have to read books to understand it, although photorealism is you getting it. It's much deeper. And my work, even on a technical level, the study of light, the study of transparency, compositionally, I'm the only one that really comes out of abstract expressionism. So my work, when you're seeing these objects, the picture plane is tilted up, and there are things all over. It's like a Jackson Pollock, There's stuff in every corner, whereas the other photorealists, Chuck is similar to me. You walk into a room, there's a floor, there's a scene, there's a sky. That is your typical way that artists painted until AbX, until Cubism, until Cézanne. Cézanne's table
is tilted in
it's
odd
flat,
ways.
and it starts tilting.
Yes.
And that tilt keeps going till you get Cubism, which is a shadow box, right? And you get space like that. And the abstract expressionists flatten it out. Roth goes flat. Abstract expressionists, there's no more floor.
There's no depth of any kind.
Pollock pokes holes in it, and he goes out into the universe. I think that's his greatness. I mean, he is no longer a painter. Pollock's greatest works are no longer paintings. He's a shaman floating around in the universe with a spacesuit. He's the equivalent of a sand painter. Those Tibetan sand will spend hours or days making something on the floor.
Right.
So he's in another world, and he broke through. I have yet to evaluate this, but they're no longer paintings. He's not applying paint. He's not dealing with space that way. He's not dealing with color that way. He has become. Now he has become a shaman. Maybe shamans are healers, and he might have been trying to heal himself.
He needed it.
He needed it desperately. But he was doing something, and I think about it. I think about him a lot. And maybe that's the most important work.
Well, it was certainly revolutionary, and I first learned about it from a friend of mine that I went to college with, who became an art critic, a very well-known art critic named Michael Fried. And he wrote about Pollock and was kind of a pioneer in figuring out what he was doing. And the thing that stuck with me was that he said that with Pollock, line is not line. It doesn't show anything. It doesn't outline anything.
Because he's not a painter anymore. He's not drawing, he's not painting.
It's just line on the canvas that he throws on the canvas. And people get excited about the action part of that. But if you look hard at a Pollock, one of the great Pollocks, Blue Poles, or what's in the modern, you begin to see relationships that you don't understand, but you can see that there are relationships there in color, in line, in the whole huge array of it, that I can see anyway, that have a feel to them. And I don't know what that feel is, but you can feel it. And that seems to me a work of genius. As you say, maybe he's a shaman, I don't know. But I never knew him. The only artists I knew were Frank Stella, who I also went to school with. And I used to go in the class. He took a class with Stephen Green. Remember Stephen Green?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if they would let me stay, I would watch the students paint. And that was fun.
It must have been exciting.
It was exciting, but I never saw Frank paint any of the initial stripe paintings. He had a place in under Brooklyn Bridge.
Dumbo.
Yeah, and painted there. It's like living in a dump. That's what apparently you have to do if you're starting out as an artist in New York. You live in a dump. Anyway, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, we only have 9 minutes left. Well, just let me point in another direction that this could go, and that is your art historical knowledge, and particularly Louisa
Roldan.
Yes, and your absolute.
What a woman.
What a woman.
She was no dope. She went straight to the Pope. I'm writing a song about Louisa Roldan.
Sounds like fun. And your reaction to that, I think, is kind of amazing, that this Christian woman, and you're not Christian, you're Jewish, mm-hmm. and you react so strongly to this amazing, the Macarena Esperanza, which means the name Macarena and hope, the Lady of Hope. And you had a reaction to that. You describe it in this book. That was very much like a reaction I had to a Caravaggio in Rome, mm-hmm. where I thought I was going to faint, where I stood there shaking, where my heart was.
Boy, that's a real art experience.
Yes, and I thought, what's happening to me? But it changed me forever.
Isn't that great?
It is great.
And it's in your head. Do you remember? Well, you do remember which one it was?
Oh yes, it's Calling of St. Matthew and the San Luigi dei Francesi, the French church in Rome. And it's in the Contarini Chapel, and the chapel is devoted to St. Matthew. And all of Caravaggio's paintings are very powerful. But this one just blew me away. And I was glad to see that you had had a similar experience.
Oh, yeah.
With the Macarena Esperanza.
I had it with Tintoretto also, but...
Really?
Yeah. But you know, isn't it wonderful that we can say to each other and to the audience out there, Michelangelo's David, and we all have it in here. Mm-hmm. You could visualize it right in here. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a Rolodex of thousands of paintings in my head that I can call up anytime I want.
That is
Let's
rather
say
wonderful.
Guernica. We all share it.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are sharing an image.
That's right.
Right?
I can still see most of it.
Isn't that marvelous?
It is marvelous. It's better in a way than writing, because it's very difficult to memorize all that writing.
Well, writing is linear, you know,
right.
and painting, you get
it's in
it
your face.
like right there.
It's immediate, yeah.
Yeah, Marcia Tucker, who started the new museum and was a curator at the Whitney then, sent me a postcard from Spain. said, this reminds me of you. And I looked at that postcard, and it was a picture of the Macarena, which I didn't know what it was. It looked realistic, but I knew that it wasn't a real person, and it wasn't a painting. It turned out to be a wood carving of the Madonna, painted, false eyelashes, false eyes. I mean, everything lower class kitsch, right? Everything that minimalism would condemn. And it went right to my heart. And I said, uh-oh, I banged that. I hope I didn't create a...
Oh, don't worry about it.
So, yeah, then I went and saw it. I dragged Bob. I said, Bob, we've got to go. We've got to go to Seville. And I took my cameras. I was a photographer. Never considered myself a photographer, but we all were because you were a photorealist. You took photographs.
Yeah.
And I had a Hasselblad, German camera that, you know, you had to salute the camera. Wouldn't let you make a mistake. And I had a Contax. I didn't like my Nikon too much. Anyhow, I found the Macarena in a poor section, middle section, in a modest church, not a big cathedral. I had to schlep all the way across Seville in burning hot August. And I remember going through, Bob stayed back because we were exhausted because it was the minute we got off the plane I had to see her. And I had my backpack filled with cameras and tripods. And I stepped through the doors, big wooden doors of this church. And I was blinded from the brilliant sun, you know, it's black. So I'm feeling my way, and there's the baptismal font, and I'm on the wall, and then I see this, like a Las Vegas showgirl, up on a niche, elevated niche with jewels. Real jewels, emeralds, rubies, diamonds. She was wearing, I think, lace the first time. They change her clothing.
Do they?
Yeah. She's either the bride or, you know, she was wearing a lace thing. There was a red, on this one, a red, bright red, a gorgeous red. Because I don't like orange reds. I mean, I use them sometimes, but it's like not a straight cadmium. It's a sort of a geranium red. It's neither a blue red or an orange red. It's that wonderful, brilliant red velvet sash, Miss America.
Yeah.
You know? And a gold crown, solid gold, shooting out, with all of these jewels embedded in glowing, brilliant, and an expression.
So sad. Tears.
Oh, tears.
Yes.
Glass tears pouring down, not one or two, but a lot of tears. So I'm fainting over this, right? Then I take out my camera and I set up my tripod, and there were two men praying. And I thought, I gotta be careful. Anyhow, I'm bobbing and taking shots underneath there because I had to bring this home to paint this, I knew. And I'm moving all over the place. And eventually they came and put their hand in front of me because I was defiling their space. So I had gotten enough. And then I went out and I said, who did this? Who made this This is a masterpiece. Everybody's got to go see it, which I have done several times. I go to Holy Week. And I see this custodian sweeping the floor. They had a lot of side chapels. And I had Miss Campo de Fierro taught us Spanish in high school. And in my broken little high school Spanish, asked the name, was there a name? And he said, sí, la Roldana. So I knew la, feminine article. Una mujer? He said, sí, una mujer. No man could capture the feelings
Right.
that a mother had for her son.
Right.
I had goose pimples. Because of course, I mean, it was me crying over Melissa.
Yeah.
I had no idea at the time. But that is the power of the Catholic Church and their imagery. They're brilliant. They're brilliant.
They are. In fact, when Lorraine and I were in Rome, we spent a month in Rome. We traded our house for an apartment in the center of the city. And we would go into churches, and I would think, these are the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen in my life. And if I were a religious person, I might want to be a Catholic just to go to these churches. And what I also like about the Catholic tradition, I would never be a Catholic, never under any circumstances. But what I like about the tradition, the artistic tradition, is that everybody has their own symbol. We were sitting in one church, and there was a stucco relief up in one corner of the nave, stuck into the ceiling, really. And it was it was stucco, actually, of a man writing. And I thought, there's a lion. This must be St. Jerome.
Oh, sure.
It has to be St. Jerome.
Yes.
And every saint, like the arrows for Sebastian, and the, you name a saint.
I took a course at Yale, iconography of the Bible. I recognize every saint,
Yes.
their attributes. You know, I collect saints. If in New York, my whole house is filled with saints. You're a nice Jewish girl. You know, everybody thinks I'm Catholic,
Well,
but
you
there's
also-
Lucy holding her eyes on a plate. And we had ways of remembering the name of the angel who brought food to Daniel in the lion's den because he needed sustenance.
Right.
You know what his name is?
No.
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk. I'd ways, St. Lawrence was grilled so that he was BLT.
Yeah.
But they're brilliant in that.
Yeah. We have run out of time, believe it or not.
But Tony, we didn't talk about your poem.
Oh, forget the poems.
I love Tony's poetry, and I I liked one of them so much. It's in The Four Horsemen. The painting's called The Galloping Horsemen of the Apocalypse, but Tony's got a painting written in an arc. When you see
A poem, not a painting.
a poem written in that I wrote that he wrote, that I put in the painting. It's a beautiful poem, Tony.
Jeannie, I think we're done.